So when you're touch starved, it means that you're not getting touch that's wanted. You can be touch starved and still be getting a lot of unwanted touch or unwelcome touch, like somebody who's non-consensually touching you. I think people who are touch starved can be depressed, they can be anxious,
Mm.
they don't feel good in their body. It's a hormone that's produced when you touch other people. Tons of health benefits, including it reduces inflammation, it reduces the effect of the cortisol in your heart, it reduces your blood pressure, it boosts your immune system. They've done studies where it makes you less hungry, it's a painkiller. It helps wound healing. There's all these things, and yet we don't really think about it as part of our health and, as an integral part of our health.
Hello, everyone. Once again, welcome to another exciting episode of our podcast, Life as We See podcast with A&A, where we bring you exciting topics around faith, love, relationships, true life stories, and everything in between. And on today's episode, I have Epiphany. Welcome, Epiphany.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited for our conversation today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I love your background. I love your glasses. I love it all. Really nice.
Thank you.
So, a quick intro on Epiphany. Epiphany Jordan, MPH, CPH, is a caregiver by nature and profession. She's on a mission to rebrand the human touch. And we're going to dive deeper into that topic, the importance of human touch. Why do we need to be in connection, touch one another? So, excited to learn all about that, Epiphany. Thank you so much once again for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Let's get into it. We have
Yes.
a lot of
Okay.
ground to cover.
A lot, a lot. Okay, let's start with learning about you. Can you tell us about yourself, your background, where you're from, what has been your life's journey so far?
Hmm. I should probably like work it into a soundbite, but generally I win the Crazy Family Award. My father was Muslim and he was from India. He grew up in South Africa. My
Wow.
mother is half Catholic and half Jewish, and she was born in Palestine, grew up in Palestine, the United States, and also Vienna, Austria, which is where her family was from. So I was definitely something of like the weirdo, the outcast kid. I was always an outsider as I was growing up, and I kind of toggled back and forth between like wanting to belong, wanting to fit in, wanting to have connection and community, and just kind of pushing it all away. And so I spent a lot of my 20s and 30s just kind of bopping around and having fun, and I ended up in Austin, Texas. And the way that I kind of got into this subject of studying human touch, I was studying sacred sexuality with a woman out of Atlanta, and she would go to pagan festivals, and her thing was, we're talking about the worshiping the goddess, but we're not talking about worshiping the goddess in her sexual aspect. And so one year, 2008 or 2009, I went to a festival with her and helped her with her different offerings over the course of the weekend. Several of her students were there. And we did this. One of the offerings was called a Karuna session, and it was a ritual around non sexual touch. And I was just really, really struck by how the profound impact it was having on the people who came in and saw us. They were just like, oh my God, this feels so good. They were crying. They were just deeply relaxed. They seemed so relieved. And I just kind of kept thinking about it. And in 2013, I started playing with the format a little bit with a friend, and people were really receptive to it. We decided to turn it into a business. And from there, I've just been, so for the past 10 or 11 years, I've been just kind of nerding out on this topic of touch, and, how much it affects so many different areas of our life, our body, our culture, our biology, our psychology, all these different things. And I've just found it to be a really fascinating topic, and I've gone deeper and deeper into it over the years.
Wow, that is interesting. First of all, I'm wowed by your multi ethnicity or multi-racial
It's
composition or whatever it is.
I know, I'm like, I got all three of the world's major religions. I got all the guilt in the world.
Yeah. Oh my God, that is such a rich. I'm sure your childhood was very rich with all of that, influence.
Y- Yeah, both of my parents were also college professors. So I had a friend who asked me once, he's like, what did you guys talk about at the dinner table? He's like, I wish I had been a fly on the wall for that. So,
Wow, that is awesome. Nice. Okay, so I
yeah.
wanted to know, why is human touch important? Because I grew up in a very busy metropolitan city back in
Uh-huh.
Africa, in Nigeria, where I come from. And sometimes you get into a bus and there's so much, maybe the buses could be crowded. And so you're just touched from all sides. Like you're making
Yeah.
bodily contact always, right? And sometimes it can be uncomfortable, sometimes it can be stressful. And honestly, my personality, I really would rather not you touch me. But I know
Yeah.
that, it's important to get that human touch. So why is it important? Why is human touch important?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something that it's not even just humans, it's mammals in general. You see of course, like mammals cuddle with each other when they're, nursing their young and stuff, but it goes on throughout their lives. Like I have a 17-year-old cat and she wants to be in my lap all the time. She wants comfort, she wants closeness. I think, probably part of it is that she's cold a lot of the time, but it's like she wants that, that reassurance and that connection. It's like she sleeps on top of me
Mm-hmm.
every night. And so not only is it a mammalian thing, but our species started out with touch. We've needed it for most of human history as for warmth and safety. When we were cavemen, we slept in big piles to keep from freezing to death and also to protect ourselves. If you
Mm-hmm.
were cast out from your tribe or your group, or that meant death. If you had grown up in a cold climate before the advent of electricity, you would have been sleeping in one bed with your entire family during the winter
Mm-hmm.
to keep from freezing to death. And it's also how we start out, each of us individually starts out our lives after we're born. There's tons and tons of research on the importance of touch for neurological development in infants, especially the first 12 to 18 months. It is hugely influential in emotional regulation and also like our ability to attach and bond with other people. And there's the touch and its underlying chemical that's produced, oxytocin. It's a hormone that's produced when you touch other people. Tons of health benefits, including it reduces inflammation, it reduces the effect of the cortisol in your heart, which is a stressor. It reduces your blood pressure. It boosts your immune system. They've done studies where it makes you less hungry. It's a painkiller. It helps wound healing. There's all these things, and yet we don't really think about it as part of our health and, as an integral part of our health. In the past 100 years, we've gotten further and further apart from each other. Our culture
Mm-hmm.
is changing, our society is changing, the way that we live and interact with each other is changing. And, it's kind of the simplest form of connection. I mean, we actually have cells in our skin that register emotions when you're touched. We have discriminatory cells, which are like hot, cold, rough, smooth, and then we have these cells that measure affective touch, which is, this person is touching me and they're trying to comfort me, or this person's touching me and they're angry or whatever. So, it's hardwired into our biology. And the less of it, the further apart that we get from each other,
Mm-hmm.
the harder it is to connect. And, we're seeing all kinds of different mental problems that may or may not be related to our lack of touch.
Mm. That's actually true. That's true because I feel like where I'm from in Africa, like there's a lot of touch, a lot of contact, right? So I would say people are happier, right?
Yeah.
They might not have a lot, but they are happier.
Hmm.
Their mental state is better because there's, that connection with other human beings, unlike it is here, I guess. Um,
Yeah, I'm curious what it was like in your family growing up. Were your parents and your siblings, were y'all really affectionate, like physically affectionate with each other? Was there a lot of hugging and cuddling or
ah, not really. I think it's
ah,
also
okay.
cultural. Yes, I guess my culture, my own specific culture where I come from, um, it's not a lot of like, maybe my parents hugging me every morning or not all that.
Hmm.
No, not really. I wouldn't say it was. No, but I would say maybe the connection maybe came from my siblings because I come from a very big family. So there was a lot of,
Okay.
wrestling and, like
Yeah.
playing around, just touching one, like just in play, playful kind of
Yeah.
affectionate touch. And maybe let's see, sometimes though from family as well, maybe if you have someone visiting from out of town or you haven't seen in a while a relative, right? There's always this, oh, go hug your aunt, go hug your uncle. There was always
Uh-huh.
it's an acceptable way to greet.
Yeah.
Just hug and all that. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah, one of the things I love about doing podcasts and talking to people from different cultures is that it's the culture around touch really varies from country to country and culture to culture. I mean, that's a huge influence on who, when, and why we touch other people.
That's true. Yeah. I think where I'm from, like people just hug. Like I noticed it was when I got to the US here, you ask someone, are you a hugger? Can I hug you? Back home, not really. Like you see someone, especially an older person, there's just this expectation that, oh, you have to go hug your old, the elder ones and just greet them, hug them and all that. And they kind of bless you. So yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. Touch is a blessing. So, is it specifically touch from your elders that is a blessing, or is it also a blessing to like hug somebody who would be your peer?
It's more of from an older person, like an older, wiser person. Um,
Okay. And why
yeah.
is that? Can you explain it a little? I've never heard this, so.
Yeah, I mean, experience, right? Well, they've lived a long life. They have lots of experience. Culturally, we believe that older people have some kind of power over you to like bless you or dictate what your future becomes or something like that. Especially
Hmm.
older people within your family. I'm not saying any old person you see walking around, even
Okay.
old people. Yeah, there's always, oh, be kind to the elderly people, do good to them, and they will bless
Mm,
you. So whenever they bless you, that blessing stays because God hears them because they've been on this earth longer. They are more connected to God and things like that.
okay.
So,
Now, I have a question for you personally. I think you said that you don't necessarily like to be touched. So if you're hugging one of your elders, like your aunts or uncles, does it feel like a blessing or no?
it does feel like a blessing. So if it's coming from
Okay.
family, I know, fine. But it's when I'm in a random place, like I said, maybe in a bus or in a crowded area in a crowd, then
Right.
touching different people, like, don't touch me. Right. But if it's family, yes, it feels very
Okay.
warm and
So it sounds like a lot of the touch in Nigeria just comes from the fact that there's a large population and people are literally living closer to each other.
well, yeah, well, it depends on where you grow up. I grew up in a metropolitan city that was maybe
Yeah.
like New
Uh-huh.
York. It's like when you grow up in New York, when you get into the subway, right? Everyone is in your face, right? Even walking on the street, you're like, you have more contacts with people. Yeah, similar to that. But some people grew up maybe in the quieter towns where there are
Yeah.
not as many people, and yeah, might not be
Okay.
very so.
Interesting. Yeah, I remember that. I lived in San Francisco for about 10 years and I remember riding the bus at rush hour. Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody was like trying not to touch each other and sometimes you have to
yeah.
when people are all crowding in. So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. So, what does it mean to be touch starved? Because I was going through your material earlier. What does it mean to be to be starved of touch? And what are the symptoms that someone is touch starved?
Oh, yeah. So when you're touch starved, it means that you're not getting touch that's wanted. You can be touch starved and still be getting a lot of unwanted touch or unwelcome touch, like somebody who's non-consensually touching you. I think people who are touch starved can be depressed, they can be anxious,
Mm.
they don't feel good in their body. One of the things I find is that, people feel really disconnected and they get kind of paranoid of other people. They really kind of question people's ulterior motives, and I think it's something that really contributes to loneliness. I mean, I spent a lot of time in the school that I just finished studying loneliness in the elderly. I was actually did a I served as a companion for a lonely elderly man, and I could tell he hadn't been touched in a long time. We actually never really hugged or touched, but man, everybody was out to get him, and
Mm.
everything. He would take things personally, and very very defensive and just mistrustful, and
Mm.
thought that people were bad. And you can be depressed, you can be anxious, you can just kind of be checked out.
Mm.
Like you clench all your muscles, you can't really relax. So
Mm.
it's physiological and psychological. I think touch starvation, and so many of us are experiencing it, and we just don't really talk about it. We don't think about it. Like I said, we don't think about it as
Mhm.
part of health and wellness, which is really a shame, because if it's peer to peer in some way, it's absolutely free.
Mhm.
It's not like you have to buy special foods or supplements, or you have to
Mhm.
join a gym or something. These different ways of that people boost their health and wellness. It's
Yeah.
a very simple and straightforward way to
Mhm.
change, make a lot of changes.
To your health. Wow. Interesting. I've never heard of touch in this view, being talked about this way. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So what are the different types of touches? Because, not every touch is good
Okay.
touch.
Yeah, exactly. I did a thing a while back that was kind of like a matrix of human touch. And let's see, we broke it down as, let me see if I can remember. It's been a few years since I did this. So foundational touch is like the touch that you get with your family. There is social touch, which is, shared between friends. It could also be like playing team sports, or,
Mm.
doing some sort of dancing or something like that. There is uh, medical touch, or therapeutic touch, where somebody may be touching you in a way that you don't like if
Mhm.
you for instance, like if you go to the dentist and they take that like huge needle and stick it. I mean, it's touch that's necessary,
Mhm.
that we might need it, or like somebody drawing blood from you or something. I also kind of put massage, well, actually, I'm not going to put massage in that. There's transactional touch,
Mm.
which is where you go to get a massage, or getting your hair cut, or
Mhm.
getting a pedicure or a facial, or a massage, those kinds of things, where it's touch from a stranger, but it's in kind of a socially acceptable
Mm.
way of doing it, that you're paying for. And so you don't
Mhm.
have a connection to this person, but you're letting them touch you, and
Mhm.
that the touch that they're giving you is supposed to make you feel better.
Mhm.
And then there's unwanted touch,
Mhm.
which is, it could be, somebody being physically aggressive with you, punching you. It could be something as simple as somebody grabbing your arm, or, some sort of sexual harassment where somebody rubs up against you. It could be
Mhm.
something worse, like child abuse or sexual
Mhm.
assault or something
Mm.
like that. There's a lot of that kind of touch. And so, yeah, there's lots of, we also don't really break it down that way. All touch is not equal.
Right.
While it's possible to enjoy or be aroused by non-consensual touch, as a
Mhm.
general rule, I think about, I call it, my phrase for it, my term for it is nurturing human touch. And it's
Mm.
touch that's designed to make you feel cared for, relaxed, soothed,
Mhm.
connected, seen, that, like, it's touch that makes you feel like you matter.
No matter.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. That's interesting. I know touch is one of the five life love languages,
Love
right? Physical
languages, for
touch.
sure, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. It's just actually coming to my mind. I'm like, oh wow, it's actually some people's thing. Again, for me, I don't think it's one of my love languages because I mean, I can receive touch, but it's not something I yearn or crave for. I don't know, um,
Yeah.
but so for someone who is single, for instance, or someone who doesn't have that much connection, how can they receive the touch? Like, what is a healthy level or dose of touch one needs? I might not like the touch, but it probably would help me my mental health like better. What kind of, yeah.
So you're sitting here and you're talking to me about the fact that you don't like touch. And in my world, when we're talking about nurturing human touch, that's totally okay. I'm not here to convince you, if you're happy with it, if you're happy with the amount of touch that you get or don't get, then that's fine. I often talk to people who want to change it, who are like, I don't like touch, is there a way that you can help me be more comfortable with it? And it's an interesting conversation to have. I feel like people have, like how people have different sex drives, like some
Mm-hmm.
people want a lot of sex and some people don't. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
very similar with touch. There's some
Mm-hmm.
people who are just, they're very sensitive, or, it just doesn't feel comfortable to them. A lot of times I find, if I start digging in a little bit with people about why they don't like touch, it comes out pretty quickly. Well, I did not grow up in an affectionate family, or
Mm-hmm.
my dad used to hit me or hit my mom, and so they have this, they're very wary about touch. And like I said, I think the most important thing is that you have to, or one of the most important points about this is you have to respect other people's boundaries, because if you go in to hug somebody and they don't want to be hugged and their body
Mm-hmm.
like stiffens up and you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of feel them pushing away, then
Mm-hmm.
that's not good.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as for people who want more touch in their lives, it's going to vary from person to person. It'll
Mm-hmm.
depend on, your upbringing, the culture you grew up in. Did you
Mm-hmm.
grow up in a religious environment?
Mm-hmm.
Your gender, touch for men and women is dealt with, like
Mm-hmm.
it's very
Yeah.
common for women to be able to touch each other, but not men.
Mm-hmm.
It could have to do with your job. I had a friend who was a CEO of a company, and he's really affectionate and he's like the nicest person in the world. And he was like, I realized after a time that I had to like stop coming into work in the morning and, giving all my employees hugs, because if you're the boss, then that feels really comfortable. But if you're in the employee, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
there's that power imbalance there. If
Mm-hmm.
I hug this person, am I going to, if I don't say yes to hugging my boss, am I going to get fired or something? So
Mm-hmm.
it was hard for him to pull back. So there's not a one size fits all. I kind of think of it as akin to exercise. Like if you went to your doctor and your doctor was like, you need to get more exercise, there's a tons of different ways you could do that. You could join a gym. You could do YouTube videos in your living room. You could
Mm-hmm.
go for walks every day. You could hire a personal trainer. You could join a sports team. You could
Mm-hmm.
take a dance class. There's lots of different options. And I feel like we don't really have those sorts of options around touch, which is unfortunate. The transactional stuff that we talked about might be more comfortable for people. The problem with that is a lot of people can't afford it. I feel like for people who have a big circle of friends who are single, it's one of the things that I talk about a lot, like I talk about it in the book, is that we, because we have this cultural belief that touch equals sex, that as adults, the only reason you touch another adult is because you want to be sexually romantically involved with them.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about one person touching another person, there's that specter of, oh, this is going to get weird. And so when you have one person touching another person, when it's two people, it feels like a sexual experience. But if you're doing it with three or four or five or six people, it becomes a social experience,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just going to call it out right now. It's going to feel very weird and
Mm-hmm.
awkward to do that because we don't have social scripts about how to touch our friends other than a hug, hello, or goodbye when we see each other.
Mm-hmm.
Another tip I would give people is being vulnerable and being honest about it. It's like I talk to so many people who are touch starved, and yet we're all kind of ashamed of it. We think that there's something wrong with us because we don't have a relationship, but almost
Mm-hmm.
half of Americans are single.
Mm-hmm.
There was a new study that came out. Pew Research does a lot of studies on love, sex, relationships, dating. Over half of single people have not had sex in the past year, and if that's kind of where we get our touch needs met, then we're kind of screwed if we're
Right.
single. So there's a lot of us who are in this situation, but none of us are talking about it because we're all ashamed of it. We think there's something wrong with us. And so being vulnerable, like admitting, like, hey, this is something that I'm really missing.
Mm-hmm.
How would you feel about us trying to figure out a way to alleviate it? If the other person's amenable,
Mm-hmm.
that people really find that when their friends are vulnerable with them about it, that
Mm-hmm.
it feels very brave. And,
Yeah.
even if they're like, no, I'm sorry, no thanks, I can't do that with you, they
Mm-hmm.
still have a lot of respect for them for putting
Opening up.
themselves out. Another thing I would say is that you can start really small.
Mm-hmm.
It could be as simple as, when you're talking about a difficult experience, asking the other person if they can just put their hand on your shoulder or your arm, or, holding hands in a restaurant, in a public place.
Mm-hmm.
It could be, you could like sit facing each other with your legs stretched out in front and just put your feet against each other. You could sit on a couch and watch a movie, and instead of sitting at opposite ends of the couch,
Mm-hmm.
sit next to each other so that your shoulders are touching and your legs are touching. It's like, even that little bit of touch makes people go, oh God, that feels so good. And so it's to recognize that it's a really powerful thing, and to kind of cross that gap is difficult, but it's like once you kind of get past that place and your fingers, your hands actually touch, it's like, wow, why aren't we doing this
Yeah.
more?
Yeah. Wow, like just hearing you speak, I'm like, it's actually really true. Because I wonder if we were more open to like this concept of touch, if like most of the things we struggle with in terms of mental health, like feeling sad,
Yeah,
depressed. Because I know sometimes when I get hugs, maybe from my sister or from someone, maybe like a church member, I go to church and like they say hug, greetings, and I hug.
yeah,
I actually feel good afterwards, right? Like there's just this
uh-huh,
feel good, like, oh wow, I exchanged some warmth, but I wonder if we become more intentional about it to say, you know what. And so when it comes to the touch we're talking about, right, it's not anything sexual, it's very
no,
non-sexual, and it's just to connect, right? So is there a way to do that? Are there areas to touch, like, because I can say to my friend, hey, I feel touch stabbed, can we touch? The way it sounds even sounds funny, like, can we touch ourselves? It sounds very very crude. So how do you go about that? Like the touching.
yeah. Well, I wanna call out for a second this idea that touch is a sexual thing affects people who are in romantic relationships too. There's a lot of people who are touch starved who are in romantic relationships. And if like if people are struggling and for some reason they stop having sex, or they
Mhm.
don't want to have sex and they're not talking about it, then their partner goes in for a hug and they're pushing them away. So it's like when sex goes away in relationship, touch also does, because they think, oh, that person's hugging me, they're trying to initiate sex and I don't want to have sex, so
Mhm.
get away. As far as the body stuff is concerned, just really kind of staying away from the chest and the genitals. And again, you can make it really, really small and simple. I mean, it could be even as simple as like, we're going to like touch our index fingers to each
Mm.
other. So hands, arms, shoulders, face, hair, back, it could be as simple as like scratching somebody's back for them.
Mhm. Mhm.
Legs, feet, some people's feet are ticklish, but like
Mhm.
feet can be really good because you're like all the way at the other end of their body.
Mhm.
You're not. that physically close to them, if
Mhm.
you're like giving somebody a foot rub or something. I like to do like sometimes like I'll have some girlfriends over and we'll have like a spa night, where we're braiding each other's hair and, doing each other's nails or, putting those weird face masks on and stuff because it's kind of a socially acceptable way
Mhm.
to share touch. And so it's like it kind of side loads it in. Again, I really think that being in a group is really helpful, having more than two people there,
Yeah.
if that's at all possible. But mostly it comes down to negotiating. Like and really talking to the other person and finding out what's acceptable to them and what would feel good. Like somebody might say, like for instance, I love to like stroke people's face. Like my mother's in assisted living, and some of the elderly people, it's like to be able to do this to them, they're just like they think it's wonderful. But I might be talking to a friend and can I stroke your face? And they're like, no, that's something that I reserve for a romantic partner. And, you have to say, okay, and just figure out what's best.
Mm.
What the idea here is like communicating and finding out what works for
For
each of
them.
you.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I think, yeah, I'm just thinking about my friends. I'm like, would they think I'm weird if I go say, hey, I feel like, can we touch each other? But I guess coming from that angle of, trying to explain why touch is beneficial, right? So can you share a
Yeah.
bit more why, it's beneficial for us to be in that contact, like, touching one
Hmm.
another and being closer, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it's like it's kind of a very fast form of connection. It's a good way to, a lot of times, like if somebody's going through a hard time, you don't know what to say to them,
Hmm.
but just like being able to put your hand on their forearm or something, so that that's a good way of telling people you care, you matter to me. I think you're important and I see your pain. One of the things that I like to talk about is if we live in this paradigm, which all of us kind of do around the idea that touch equals sex, or that it's reserved for like taking care of our children,
Mm.
that's another one, or that it's something bad that happens to us that we have to push away. So if we want to expand it out, then we can have touch for stress when relaxation when we're feeling stressed. We can have touch for comfort when we're grieving. We can have touch for connection when we're feeling lonely. We can have touch for soothing when we're traumatized. And I just feel like it's something that makes us more human,
Mm.
that it's like I think people have it's a human tendency to want to help others and take care of each other. And it's a really simple way to do that.
Mm.
Again, to say to somebody, how you're feeling is important. It's like all of us go through these different experiences in life. We go through happy experiences and
Mhm.
joy, but we
Mhm.
also go through a lot of terrible things. And a lot of times we suffer and we're in pain and feeling lonely by ourselves. It's
Mhm.
like we don't have somebody else. I mean, think about something like having a pet die, like maybe you had a dog that slept next to you every night and all of a sudden you don't have that anymore. I mean,
Mm.
that's a painful, painful, painful loss. And, I see some people treating it as such, like, these days, there's a lot more home euthanasia where a vet will come to your house so that you don't have to like take your animal to the vet to have
Mhm.
them euthanized. And they can do it where you're holding your animal and they're in their home and you're comforting them and being
Mm.
able to let them go. But then it's like after you do that and you're left alone, a
Mm.
lot of times it's like how do we process that stuff?
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
like I feel like a lot of times we just hold it all in and
Mhm.
we don't share that level of our humanity with each other. So it makes us more multifaceted
Mhm.
and more human. just
Yeah.
more human.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's interesting. A guy or a man, men are not as affectionate as women, right, by nature. So for men, I
Correct.
imagine it will be harder for them to even admit they need touch. So what will you be? What will
Hmm.
be your advice to the men listening or watching? How?
Yeah. So I think, actually, let me ask you really quickly before I answer, what is the culture in Nigeria around men touching men? Are they affectionate with each other? Do you see them
Good
walking down
question.
the street holding hands or
Nope,
no?
nope, nope.
Okay.
Men are very masculine, very maschimo or whatever it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, machismo, yeah. Well, I've seen, I feel like this is something that's been taken from men. I mean, if you look,
Mm,
there's if you go online and start researching this a little bit, there are all kinds of photos from about 100 years ago of
mhm.
men being super affectionate and tender with each other, sitting on each other's laps, their arms around each other,
Wow.
they're hugging, you
Mm,
know. And I mean, if you think about it again from that survival aspect, like 200, let's say 200 years ago, if you were a cowboy or a soldier, or you were like riding your horse and going from inn to inn and
mhm.
spending the night, there were a lot of situations where you would be snuggling up with another man to keep from freezing to death.
Oh, that's
It's
true.
like it was, so it wasn't something that was really thought about. So I feel like there's an opportunity for men to and it's a totally an individual choice. I can't sit here and go, well, men, you should be like hugging your
Mhm.
friends if they don't want to, but that is something where they can go against the culture or work through if they want to. If not, then they may have to do something more transactional, like it was funny. I was at Burning Man last month, and our camp did this self care pop up where we were giving people foot baths and facials. And we had so many guys coming in, and it's like they're laying back in this chair, and I'm like rubbing aloe vera on their face. And you can just see their minds going through this thing of like, oh my God, you mean women do this with each other all the time? What? This is available? And I'm pretty sure that there were several of them who went out and booked a facial,
Mhm.
went and did that afterwards. There are also professional cuddlers. I don't know if that's a concept that you're
Uh,
familiar
I've
with,
heard
people
about that. Yeah.
who get paid to cuddle. That's always an option.
Mhm.
Actually, if you read, like I've spent a lot of time doing research on sex work and sex workers. There's so many stories of sex workers who will have guys come in and they'll just be like, I just want to lay on the bed and get cuddle and talk. They don't even want to
Oh.
have sex. And again, that kind of stuff gets into, it becomes problematic because so many of us, it's a resource issue. I
Mhm.
think I read that or there's more clients of massage therapists who are men than women. And
Mm.
so it's finding those socially acceptable ways.
Ways.
But,
Mm.
again, actually, I would say like another option for that kind of thing if you don't have a lot of money is beauty schools. Often, you can go get a student haircut or,
Mhm.
a facial from students who are learning to be
Mhm.
estheticians, or there's massage schools where you can get a student massage, so there's
Mhm.
options, or like a student pedicure where
Mhm.
you can get it for $10. So it may not look great and
Mhm.
it may take a
Mhm.
lot more time, but it costs you less money. So I would encourage that. But I would also encourage men to think about, if how they feel about sharing touch with other men. And then, of course, there's also the option of, being in a group setting,
Mhm.
where it's a social activity, where it's a group of men and women, and
Mhm.
you can just, do
Yeah.
it in that way so that it doesn't feel like a sexual
Doesn't feel
one-on-one.
weird.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's gonna feel weird anyways, It's like, and I don't know if I said this before, but your friends will think you're weird if you ask them for this stuff. But that's part of the process.
Yeah.
It's
It's
gonna
true.
be weird because we don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
But I also feel like it's if you understand that and you acknowledge it, then you can, like, everybody can kind of giggle and go, okay, this is weird, but yeah,
It
actually it
feels
feels really
good.
good.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So
True.
it's worth it to try and work through that weirdness.
Yeah, that's true.
We do all kinds of things where, we have all kinds of experiences
Yeah.
where it's weird and it's awkward because
Mm.
it's new,
It's
I mean, like going and doing, like, a common one, like going and doing a karaoke thing for the first time. It's like, this is weird. I'm terrified. I've never sang in front of other people. And then you get through it and you're like, ah, this isn't so bad. So
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Wow, that's really nice. I feel like I'm just, my whole view of touch is like changing because honestly, it makes me feel good. Like when I'm having a hard day and I just see like that friendly face, that friend, like someone I know, and I get a hug, I'm like, I feel so good. So yeah, that's actually nice. I wish more people talked about this because it's an interesting field, you know,
yeah.
because I feel
I
like
wish more people talked about it
I
too.
know because I feel like
That's just me.
medication, like we might not need much medications, right? We might not need as much visits to the doctors, if we're more
Yeah.
connected, and we'll be
I've
happier.
been Yeah, I mean, definitely. I will tell you, like, I used to, this is another option for Touch Stars single people that may or may not work, or you may
Mm,
or may not be able to find it. Similar to professional cuddlers, there's a thing called a cuddle party where you go and there's a group of strangers and you kind of go
mhm,
through some exercises,
mm,
learning about boundaries and negotiations, and then you have a couple of hours of cuddling. I will tell you, so I used to lead these, and after we would get done, we'd like go around the circle and ask people, give me one word to describe how you're feeling. People would say peaceful, blissed out,
mm,
content, happy,
mhm,
joyful,
mhm.
calm, relaxed. I'm sorry, but those are all things that I feel
Yes.
like all of us need more of in our lives.
Mhm,
And actually, it was interesting that you were talking about medication. Like, I, during the pandemic, I saw a few research articles making a connection between loneliness and human touch. I've been talking about this and
mm.
thinking about it for a really long time, but there's somebody who was like trying to develop a pill for loneliness. And
A
I'm like, this is
pill?
ridiculous. A pill. Yeah,
Wow.
like I'm lonely, so I'm going to take a pill, right? I think the pill that we need is more human connection.
Human
It's like we need to
connection.
turn toward each
Yeah.
other instead of away from each other.
That's true. That's true. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Honestly, I see it even with comparing this society with the society where I'm coming from, where people they might not have as much, but they are happier because it's just communal coming together and just doing life together. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Obviously our culture has a lot to learn from
Mm-hmm.
y'all's culture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that that's true. And I want to say, do not quote me on this, but I want to say that as a general rule, people who where they evolved in warmer climates are a little bit more touchy-feely.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in colder climates it's more of a necessity, so it doesn't, it just
Yes.
feels like a part of life. But I think in warmer climates, I don't know. Like I said, I'm
Possible.
not
Yeah.
100% about that, but
Yeah. It's possible. It's possible. Yeah. People just touch you back home, whether you like it or not. Like, he just grab at you.
yeah, yeah.
Anyway, so I wanted to talk about your book, Somebody Hold Me, the single person's guide to nurturing human touch. Can you tell
Oh,
us more about
what?
it?
So I ended up writing the book. I had a hands-on business in Austin, Texas, this kind of ritualized human touch that was done with two practitioners. And, one of the things that I was thinking about was, okay, this is actually like a fairly expensive treatment or procedure. And what, a lot of the people who need this the most can afford it the least.
Mm,
Right around the time that I started working on the book, I also I got out of a 5-year relationship, and I knew
mm,
from the studies that I had been doing that, if I didn't get into another romantic relationship pretty quickly, that
mhm,
I would probably be in a position where I wouldn't have much access to touch, and I my friend circles and my communities are fairly alternative. So there's a lot of hugging and,
Mm-hmm.
people are really kind of loving on each other. So I get more of it than a lot of people, but, to have like, really sustained intentional touch, we wouldn't. So I created the book, and the first part of it is, a lot of the, we talk about the biology, we talk about our culture that we live in, we talk about changing
Mm-hmm.
relationships. People are getting married later and having fewer children. So many of us are single now, all these
Mm-hmm.
different things.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about types of touch, I talk about, power imbalances and philosophies. And then the second part of the book is kind of a DIY workshop.
Mm-hmm.
So you could get together with three people and it takes you through step by step of how you into, how you have like exercises that you can do around touch. So it allows you to an opportunity to feel like, I like that kind of touch, but I don't like that kind of touch. Or I like having my back touched, but I don't like somebody touching my feet or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows you to figure it out. It also allows people to create a common frame of reference so that afterwards, if you had a friend who was like, hey, you want to come over to my house and we'll cuddle up on the couch and watch a movie, you're not going to be like, are they trying to have sex with me? You're going to be like, they want me to come over to their house and cuddle up on the couch and watch a movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, there's also some discussion and options for, people who don't have a circle of friends who might need to figure out a different way to get those touch needs met. So.
I see. Wow, that is awesome. I love the breakdown, of the book. Okay, awesome. So it's not, well, I guess even though it's written a single person's guide, it could also be for people who are in relationship or marriage, like we've
That's my
established
next
that.
book.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, that's the next book I want to
So
write.
that
I want to write a book about non-sexual touch for couples
couples.
because
Okay.
when I was writing the book, people would be like, single people aren't the only people who have
Mm-hmm.
issues with not getting enough touch, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, actually I do know that. So, it definitely affects married people as well, and
Mm-hmm.
I would like to see us really expand out our definition of touch and why we touch other people and why
Mm-hmm.
why it's important, that it could be very integral to our survival in the coming
Mm-hmm.
years,
Mm-hmm.
as the world gets more stressful and
Right.
uncertain,
Right.
and we're getting less and less
Mm-hmm.
trusting of each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, how do you counteract that besides,
Yeah.
showing somebody physically that you care for
Care
them
for them.
if they want it,
Mm-hmm.
obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I also wanted to find out from you quickly. So, do you think, as parents, I'm not a parent, I don't have kids, but do you think when it comes to touching, right, parents should also learn to maybe hug their kids more, touch them more, and like just nurture them in such a way that they appreciate, touch. And like you said, I think you said something about people who don't have touch as love language. I really don't know why it's not why I don't think it's one of my love languages, because but what would be your advice to parents regarding children? Is touch critical
Yes,
or?
it is absolutely critical. The more touch that you give kids in their first year or two of life, that literally sets them up
Okay,
for emotional regulation and attachment throughout their lives.
I see.
Like if you read anything about, there was a lot of studies written about the Romanian orphans who were just thrown in these orphanages, and
Mm,
they didn't have enough staff, so they weren't getting touched. And like I've read some stories about what those people's lives are like now, and it's really not pretty.
oh,
So this is a two-part thing. Yes, touch is incredibly, incredibly, incredibly important for your children, and the more touch that you can give them when they're infants and into their first couple years of life, the better it will be for them. It's something that it's kind of like programming their software, because when kids are born, their brains are still plastic, the neurology and the neural pathways are still developing,
mhm,
and touch will help them develop in a way that really helps them as adults in
Mm,
numerous ways. The other thing I would say for parents, this was something we didn't really have time, and I don't think we have time to get into the research that I did about rebranding human touch, but this idea of touch as caregiver, a lot of times the touch is little kids are like grabbing, gimme, gimme,
mhm,
gimme.
mhm,
Mothers describe this experience of being touched out, so it's like when you have kids grabbing at you all day long, and then
mm,
your partner comes home and they're like they want to have sex, and they're like parents are just like, get off of me, don't touch me.
mm,
So this idea of getting really intentional nurturing touch where the caregivers are just receiving. I have thought about this a lot when I had my hands-on business. One of our most enthusiastic customer bases was new mothers. I described
mm,
what we were doing for them as putting a deposit in their overdrawn nurturing bank. It's like, here,
mm.
let us refill you.
Yeah.
Come get some touch in an environment where you are not required to do anything
Mm,
to reciprocate right now. You just lay there and receive. And they were just like, oh my God, this is the best.
wow.
So this is something that parents can do with and for each other.
Mhm,
If you don't like, if you're a single parent and you have an opportunity to do that in a group with other single parents, one of the exercises I love to do is have a group, like maybe have a group of 6 people, and
mhm,
one person lies down and then the other people just put their hands on them for a couple minutes, and you rotate so everybody gets that in the middle. And people are just like, they just feel relieved. It's, again, it's like, here, let us give to you while you can just receive and not have to do anything back in that moment. We don't have opportunities like that a
yeah.
lot in our culture, and I think we need them.
Yeah, wow, that's really good what you're doing for, your business, like helping moms that way, because I know they can be starved for all that they pour into their
Absolutely.
children. Like that is, wow, that is awesome. And I'm so sad. I wish we had gone into that. So, okay, so that has to do with caregiver, touch as caregiver. What about as love and as villain?
Sure. So what we're talking about here is I did this research project for
Mm-hmm.
school when I was getting my master's in public health on how I would go about rebranding human touch, and I settled on storytelling and brand archetypes. And
Mm,
so the people I interviewed, we kind of figured out what Touch's current brand archetypes are, and
mm,
Touch's caregiver, which we're just talking about, where parents are taking care of their kids and
mm,
nurturing their children with touch. Touch's lover is, touch between people who are romantically involved.
mm,
It's something that we aspire to. We, kind of idolize it and worship it. I mean, you think
mm-hmm.
about like the wedding industrial complex and how much money people spend on wedding and celebrating their romances. And
Mm-hmm.
then Touch's villain, where people are, it could be anything from, just getting unwanted touch to really bad unwanted touch, like sexual assault or childhood sexual
Mm,
abuse and things like that, or physical abuse as a child. And, so we don't really talk about the fact that a lot of people have these bad experiences with touch that make them distrust other people, not have good experiences
mm-hmm.
with it going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, those
Wow.
are those are those are our current brand archetypes. And then we
Okay,
came up with rebrand archetypes
I see.
as well,
Okay,
and
that's
that
nice.
make it more expansive and inclusive for more
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. I think those are really three good categories or, to put touch on that. Okay, nice. Thanks so much. Is there any last thing you wanted to say to our audience, and also where can they find you and where can they connect with your work? And yeah.
Yeah, thank you. The last thing I think I would like to say is that to understand that every person is going to be very unique in what kind of touch they want and don't want, what they like and don't like. And so it really requires slowing down and having a conversation and kind of thinking it through for yourself and
Mhm,
letting other people think it through for themselves, because it is a highly individual thing. And if you're like rushing another person into it or forcing them somehow. It's not going to feel good, and you want to get to a point where both people are like, yes, this is something I want. This is something
Mm-hmm.
that interests me, you know, and you could go through it and be like, no, that's not for me
Yeah.
afterwards, but you know, to just try. Probably the best place for people to reach me is my website, which is www.nurturinghuman touch. There's links there to getting the book online.
Mm-hmm.
It's done as you can get it as a print book, as a Kindle book,
Okay.
and also as an audio book. One of the things, I don't have a page up on my website for it yet, but one of the things that I'm starting to do is do coaching around this topic, you know, talking to somebody who's like,
Mm-hmm.
I want more touch in my life. And it's like, okay, well, let's try and figure out, you know, let's help you figure out what resources you have, how you're going to do it. And I'm just blown away by the creativity and the imagination that people bring to this, and, you know, looking, you know, like, oh, wait, I have this friend who's in a similar situation. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they would be into having a conversation about it even, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, those are kind of the two main things that I've got going right now, is the book
Okay.
and
Nice.
doing coaching around it. So yep, if people come to my website, they can shoot me an email and I'm happy to chat more.
Okay. Yeah, I'll put all of that, your website, your socials, everything in the show notes
Great.
of the podcast and also the description of the YouTube video. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh
And
my
thank you
God.
for a really good conversation. You asked so many amazing questions. It's like I
Thank
felt like we got
you.
to really kind of do a nice deep dive into this, and I appreciate
Yeah.
your
Thank you
time.
so much. Like I feel like I learned so much more about touch. Like I feel like wow, I never thought about it in this light, and you really shed a lot of light. And I'm sure people will also, you know, learn and
Yeah, I hope
open.
that I gave some people some things to chew on
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you know, think about it, because a lot of times I also feel like we really take it for granted, and
Mhm.
until you don't have it anymore, you don't really realize what it is that you're missing.
True, true. Wow.
So
Thank you so, so much. Thanks once again. Thank you so much, viewers. Thank you for joining us on this special episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you've taken a thing or two from this about touch and go touch. Go to, with people's consent, though. Go, touch, like put it into practice because I'm going to do that. It's a very good, good
I
exercise.
would love to shoot me an email and tell me how it's going for you. I
Okay.
would love to hear more about how your adventures go with it.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I will. I will. Thank you so,
Okay.
so much. Thank you, viewers. I'll see you at the next episode. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.